Something is happening in the western North Pacific right now that defies every meteorological playbook we have for the month of June. If you look at the satellite imagery, you aren't just seeing a storm. You're seeing a historical anomaly that has just shattered a 22-year record. Welcome to Terra Alerters, where I take the chaotic data scientists are panicking over and break it down so it actually makes sense. This is Super Typhoon Mekkhala, and it is behaving in a way that should be impossible this early in the season. We haven't seen anything this violent in June since 2004, and the speed at which this monster developed is genuinely terrifying for experts. Let's look at the numbers because the math on this storm is where the real nightmare begins for coastal communities. Mekkhala didn't just grow, it underwent a terrifyingly explosive intensification. It added 60 knots to its sustained wind speeds in one day, which is double the official threshold for rapid intensification. This storm went from a manageable system to a 150-mile-per-hour beast while most of the world was sleeping. At its peak, the central pressure plummeted to 935 hectopascals, creating a vacuum of power in the ocean. This isn't just a weather event. It's an atmospheric middle finger to the traditional calendar and every scientist who studies it. Many of you remember the name Typhoon Dianmu from back in 2004, the last time a June storm reached this level of catastrophic potential. That year was a turning point. A hyperactive season that launched 6 super typhoons and rewrote the history books forever. The fact that Mekkhala is mirroring Dianmu's footprint so closely suggests we are entering a new era of ocean heat dominance. I've been tracking these systems for years, and I've rarely seen a storm core remain this vertically stacked while moving at these speeds. It's like the Pacific has suddenly decided to stop playing by the rules, bypassing the usual slow buildup we expect in early summer. We're seeing sea surface temperatures reaching 30 degrees Celsius, providing the high-octane fuel this engine needs to keep roaring. But it's not just about the heat on the surface. It's about how deep that warmth goes into the water column. Usually, a storm of this size churns up cold water from the depths, effectively choking itself out and slowing down. Mekkhala isn't choking. It's feasting on a deep reservoir of thermal energy that hasn't been tapped like this in over 2 decades. As the narrator at Terra Alerts, I show you why this matters before the mainstream news picks it up. While most outlets are focused on minor disturbances, we are watching a potential Category 5 equivalent monster bearing down on the Western Pacific. The Batanes Islands and northern coastal regions of the Philippines are already feeling the fringe effects of this massive system. Even though the main eye has turned north, the enhanced monsoon rains are turning local streets into rivers as we speak. But the real concern is where this recurvature is heading next, and the targets in its crosshairs are some of the most densely populated. This isn't a what-if scenario anymore. The models are locking in, and the path is becoming dangerously clear for Japan. We have to ask ourselves, is this a one-off anomaly, or are we looking at the start of a permanent shift in our planet? The sheer defiance this storm is showing against the atmospheric shear is something I haven't seen in my entire career. Look closely at this satellite loop because the eye is almost perfectly symmetrical. In meteorology, symmetry like this is a sign of a perfectly tuned engine, extracting every possible calorie of heat from the sea. It's a point source aloft, acting like a chimney that vents air so the storm breathes faster. This level of efficiency allowed Mekkhala to jump to a super typhoon in the blink of an eye. Data from the Joint Typhoon Warning Center is making experts nervous because of an invisible triple-threat atmospheric engine. This engine is currently pushing the storm toward Japan, and what's waiting in the atmosphere ahead of it is absolutely chilling. To understand why Mekkhala is defying every standard June forecast, we have to look beneath the surface of the western North Pacific. This storm isn't just tapping into warm water. It's parked over a deep, warm pool with sea surface temperatures hitting nearly 30 degrees Celsius. Most storms churn up cold water from the depths, which eventually chokes their power. But this heat column runs incredibly deep. That means Mekkhala has a virtually bottomless fuel tank that allows it to maintain super typhoon status far longer than we usually see this early in the year. But heat alone doesn't create a monster. You need a way to vent the exhaust, and that's where the second part of the triple threat comes in. Right now, a high-efficiency chimney, known as a point source aloft, is acting as a massive exhaust system for the storm's core. This atmospheric vent allows spent air to be thrown out of the storm with incredible speed, keeping the internal engine running at peak capacity. Terra Alerts has been tracking this outflow for 48 hours, and the efficiency we're seeing is frankly staggering for a June system. When you combine that perfect venting with vertical wind shear of only 12 to 17 miles per hour, the storm becomes structurally invincible. Usually, high-altitude winds act like a pair of scissors, trying to snip the top off the storm and tilt its internal structure. But with shear this low, Mekkhala's core stays perfectly stacked, concentrating all that energy into a tight, devastating eye. This level of synchronization is rare, and it's creating a reality on the ground that the Sakishima Islands are about to face head-on. While the Philippines dodged the worst of the direct impact, the Batanes Islands are currently being lashed by rough seas and monsoon surges. The real focus now is the northward recurvature, a shift in the track that places Okinawa directly in the crosshairs by June 25th. We are looking at sustained winds of 130 knots, which is enough to flip heavy vehicles and shred modern infrastructure. Residents in Okinawa are being told to prepare for more than just rain. This is a catastrophic wind and storm surge event. Beyond the Ryukyu Islands, the steering ridge is forcing this monster toward Tosa Bay and eventually the Kanto Plain near Tokyo. By the time it reaches the Japanese mainland around June 27th, it may weaken slightly, but weaken is a relative term here. Even a downgraded version of a super typhoon can drop a month's worth of rain in hours, leading to widespread landslides and flooding. This is what I mean when I say the Pacific Basin is currently detonating like a powder keg. If you look at a global map of tropical activity right now, you'll see a terrifying contrast that most mainstream news outlets are ignoring. While the Pacific is producing record-shattering monsters like Mekkhala, the Atlantic Ocean is sitting in an eerie, unnatural silence. A massive plume of Saharan dust is currently choking the Atlantic, acting like a blanket of dry air that suffocates storm formation. It creates a two-oceans divide, where one side of the world is paralyzed by calm, while the other is facing a meteorological war. This Saharan air layer is the only thing keeping the Atlantic safe for now, but it makes the Pacific's activity look even more extreme. Near Guam, we're already watching Tropical Depression 08W, also known as Higos, as it begins to gather its own strength. There is a very real possibility that Mekkhala and Higos will interact south of Honshu, creating a complex Fujiwhara effect. This interaction could tug on the storm's path, making the final approach to the Tokyo area even more unpredictable for emergency responders. We haven't seen an early season setup this loaded since the infamous 2004 season, which changed how we view tropical cycles. Back then, Typhoon Dianmu set a benchmark for June intensity, and Mekkhala has now matched or surpassed that 22-year record. Terra Alerts is monitoring the central pressure, which has bottomed out between 935 and 945 hectopascals. To put that in perspective, that's a pressure drop so sharp it's physically painful for anyone caught near the storm's inner eye wall. As the system moves north, the primary hazards transition from pure wind speed to a combination of catastrophic storm surge and inland flooding. Now, here is the part mainstream reports are conveniently leaving out of their broadcasts. They want to call Mekkhala a rare anomaly, a one-off freak event that only happens every couple of decades. But Terra Alerts is looking at the data, and it suggests we are seeing a fundamental shift in the monster schedule. This isn't just about one storm. It is truly about the entire Pacific engine. We are currently witnessing ocean temperatures between 29 and 30 degrees Celsius. This isn't just a surface layer of warmth that a passing storm can easily stir up and dissipate. Instead, this is a deep, warm pool that extends far down into the water column. This prevents the storm from choking on cold water upwelling. We saw wind speeds jump 60 miles per hour in just one day. Without a natural break, the atmosphere is effectively handed a blank check for destruction. Mainstream science likes to play it safe, but we have to ask if this is the new scientific baseline for June. If this becomes the standard, the Pacific typhoon season has effectively been rewritten. Look back to the year 2004 when Typhoon Dianmu took a similar path as a Category 5 monster. That year didn't end with one storm. It signaled a hyperactive season with 6 super typhoons. The 2026 season is already mirroring that terrifying 22-year marker. We are seeing a loaded Pacific basin that shows no signs of slowing down its production of extreme weather. Right now, as Mekkhala charges toward Japan, we are tracking Tropical Depression Higos. This system is currently active near Guam and is gaining its own atmospheric strength. There is a high probability that these two systems will interact or even merge south of Honshu. This potential interaction could create a multi-centered weather system that defies computer modeling. While the Pacific is detonating with activity, the Atlantic remains eerily silent. This contrast is being driven by a massive plume of Saharan dust choking out tropical development across the ocean. This dust acts as a lid, keeping the Atlantic stable, while the Pacific energy is literally allowed to explode. It is a tale of two oceans, and the Pacific is winning the war. Residents in Okinawa and the Sakishima Islands need to understand the absolute danger is not just the wind. The ocean heat content is so high that the storm surge could be unprecedented for June. We are looking at wave heights exceeding 50 feet near the core of this system. That is a wall of water moving with a dangerous, deadly force toward the coast. The Kanto Plain, inland Shoku, and Tokyo are next on the list as the storm begins its recurvature. Even if the winds weaken, the sheer volume of moisture being dragged north is incredibly staggering. We track these events with such intensity here at Terra Alerts. We don't just look at the current radar, we look at the comprehensive global underlying mechanics of the planet. Is this a 1 in 22-year anomaly, or have we crossed a permanent Pacific threshold? Yes. The unfolding suggests that the dice are loaded for a very long, very violent season. Every degree of increase in that deep, warm pool is another gallon of fuel for these monsters. We are seeing the atmosphere respond to that truly unprecedented fuel in ways that should terrify us. The rapid intensification we witnessed with Mekkhala is becoming the rule rather than the exception. Yes. We must prepare for sudden storms that can transform from a breeze to a rapid environmental catastrophe overnight. This is the critical intelligence you won't get from sources that are afraid to bridge the gap. We are watching the 2026 season carefully because the patterns are clearly breaking away from history. If you are in the path of Mekkhala or the projected track of Higos, do not wait. Be sure to stay tuned to Terra Alerters as we immediately monitor this developing crisis throughout the night. If you found this urgent briefing essential, subscribe to join our community. Share this update with anyone in Japan or the Philippines who needs to see the real data.